Welcome to Midlife Unplugged, the Fuck It Years. I'm your host, Lara Portelli. This is the space where we strip away the polite BS, rip the gloves off, and get real about what it means to thrive in our second act. Each week, I'm joined by a guest who's walking their own audacious midlife path. We're talking menopause, divorce, reinvention, and everything in between. Buckle up, because this isn't your mother's midlife crisis. This is Midlife Unplugged. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Midlife Unplugged, the Fuck It Years. I'm your host, Lara Portelli, and with me today on this episode is the amazing Holly McCusker, all the way from North Carolina, America. So exciting when, you get to talk to people on the other side of the world. It's just like we're talking and having a cuppa, isn't it, Holly?
Yes, I love it. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Holly has so much to chat to us about today. And what I love about Holly is that she's not afraid to talk about the hard subjects: grief, loss, rebirth, and the mess that can often come in midlife for us, but then the beauty that can come out the other end when we're willing to put the work in, and the self exploring and the self identity and love that comes out of that. So, Holly, let's chat and start with a little bit about your journey and what got you to where you're working today. And tell me about the chapter that you're in at the moment. What chapter of your life are you in right now, and how is it different from where you used to be?
Yeah, right now I have really come back to self, to authentic self. I think that throughout life, I just wore all these different masks, not really knowing that I was doing that. And this year was the year to strip away all the masks and really come to find my soul and who I truly am as a person, as an individual. So that's the where I am. It's very peaceful. It's a nice place to be, but it's taken me a long time to get here.
Definitely. And I think that's something that a lot of, not just women, but my predominant work is with women, and it's about finding ourselves again. And we were chatting just a moment ago about where you finally got to meet yourself again. And I know my own experience nearly 4 years ago when I made my big shift from being in a 24-year relationship that wasn't healthy. I didn't know who I was anymore. And so much of my identity had just gone. I didn't know who I was, where I was heading, but I just knew that I had to do something different. And I think this happens with a lot of people in midlife. And go you for doing that. I love that. And I just talked about in the introduction, Holly, that you're not afraid to talk about some of the taboo subjects out there, and that you've had quite a bit of heartache in your life, and it all happened at once. However, in that heartache, you were able to not only meet yourself again, but rebuild and build a business around what was happening in your life. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. So well, back in 2022, I lost both of my parents in the same year. So it was 9 months apart that I lost both of my parents. A year later, I lost my career that I had built up. I was working at a matchmaking agency. I became the director of the agency. I built them a coaching program. I was at the top of my career and studying relationships and just really passionate about everything I was doing. And I got laid off. In addition, both of my kids, who I'd raised on my own, their father passed away when they were young, 2 and 4 years old, to suicide. I had raised them on my own. And so they had gone off to college. The last thing I had was my engagement. I was engaged and I thought I had finally met the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I felt like I had manifested the perfect partner for me. And the highs were wonderful, but the lows showed me that there was a lot of unhealed wounds that I hadn't worked on through. I think what ended up happening was after my husband passed away and the whole suicide and everything, I went into survival mode with my kids, raising them, wanting to be the best mom, getting into my career. And I didn't do proper healing at all. I didn't really know what proper healing was, but um, so when I got into this relationship, as time went on, what started to show up were the origin wounds. So we were both, again, when things were great, they were great. But when we hit conflict, that's when the patterns and dynamics would show up, of our unhealed wounds. And then we would be faced with those. And it created it became pretty destructive in our relationship. And it came
Mm.
to a point where I had to ask myself, am I willing to self abandon to be in this relationship? Or is it time to walk away? And I made the choice to walk away, but that meant I left everything. I literally had left all of the identities behind. Um, I did build my business at the same time, so I had that, but it was challenging because building a business, starting a business in the relationship space, and going through all of this, it was extremely challenging.
Wow. So in that relationship space, um, yeah, and this behind the scenes, you were going through those emotions, yourself and trying to work through those. And what I want to talk a little bit about now, please, Holly, is a lot of people don't talk. There's two things I want to cover because I think it's amazing what you've done, in terms of not so much surviving, but rising, working through things and rising and meeting yourself where you are at now and self-love. The two things I want to talk about is people don't talk about grief enough, I'm finding. And grief is an emotion like any other. Happy, happy, whatever other emotions are going on. And I love how you've used grief to heal and learn from that healing, then move on and rise and build your business. And how you said you went into survival mode. And I think a lot of people that are survivors of different things in life, different experiences, I think people get stuck in that survival mode. And I believe I read somewhere in your notes that we need to do work not only on our emotions, but our nervous systems and things like that. And what happens, when we go into survival mode? And so much of us gets lost because we're just constantly in adrenal overload and things like that. So talk me a little bit through when you realised that it was okay to talk about and work through the grief of what
Yeah,
had happened.
well, like the universe is no joke, right? At the same time I was going through this breakup, I had been developing a breakup grief course for my clients because I saw people
Wow.
struggling. So, in the midst of my own breakup, I had just launched this beautiful course.
Oh,
So, I think what ends up happening is you know, the discomfort of the unknown sometimes trumps over like the knowing, like not knowing what we're going to face if we make a bold move, and all of those emotions that are going to come up, that creates a lot of fear inside. So sometimes we stay in the safety of
mm,
what we know, the pain that we know versus the pain we don't know. So when I see that with a lot of clients too, so kind of making that move um you know, to end something is very challenging. And then, as women, we're expected to fix and heal and make things work. And I did that for a very long time in the relationship, and then realized I was doing so much of the emotional labor in the relationship. And that caused me to self-abandon, the core values that I had, that I truly desired and wanted in a partnership. I was missing out on that in order to keep the safety, or what I thought was the safety. Ironically enough, it wasn't safe. It wasn't a safe space for my feelings. And that safety and security is what I'd been craving my entire life. That was what was missing in childhood. And that's what I was seeking in relationships. But this unraveling showed me that I needed to create the safety for myself. that I was outsourcing that to others, and it was always leading me in the same space, which was I just attracted another emotionally available partner that was like my parents. And here we go again, right? So that's where the also the understanding of how the nervous system works, right? Because we can intellectualize all these things and read all the books and know all the answers. But if we haven't integrated and if we haven't embodied our experiences, we will continue to repeat the same patterns and dynamics. And so that's what I became aware of. Wow, I have a lot of healing to do, and I have to go into the body and become safe in my body in order to heal these things. And yes, that's possible to do in relationship if you're able to co-regulate. But if you have someone else, especially if their wounds are a little bit opposite of yours, it can create a dynamic or a cycle that it actually destroys the relationship, or it makes it very difficult to get it back to a good place. Our attachment styles, anxious avoidant loops that can really wreak a havoc on a relationship. So I really needed to step out of it so I could do the work on myself to heal and not create this pattern again in the future.
Wow, it's kind of mind blowing, but so simple at the same time.
Yeah.
I love how you just explained that and literally unpacked it because, they say we come to relationships with baggage, right, from previous relationships. And it's true. And you kind of unpacked that right there. And then, because if you didn't experience emotional safety in your childhood, you're going to seek it out. You're looking for something different, but unfortunately, we tend to seek out partners that, as you were saying, will repeat that emotional unavailability to
Yep.
us in our adulthood. And it makes me wonder, Holly, how many relationships could be not saved, that's not the right word, but worked through and things worked out if we knew what you were just talking about. You
Yeah,
know,
a
it
lot because we are in conflict. It is our wounds. We're not consciously aware of what's going. It's the past wounds that are showing up that are
mm,
triggering. So
mhm.
that's what I do with my clients. I help them create awareness around their emotional blueprint so they do have an understanding of the what shaped them as children, what's their attachment style, how do they regulate their nervous system? How does this all show up in relationship? Because yeah, I think we're doomed if we don't have the answers to those things.
Absolutely. And Holly, we were talking a little bit earlier about um, generational wounds and generational patterns, and that you've just done something recently around that, which sort of feeds into what we were just talking about, those patterns and that get repeated generation after generation. Tell me a
Yep.
little bit about that because you're quite excited that you've just finished that. Is that right?
Yes, I did my first plant medicine journey, therapeutic journey, in October, and it was really incredible because, I had spent the year doing all the work I could somatically, nervous system regulation, understanding, becoming more aware. But there's something that this journey does where it just takes away all of the fear and anything that might be in the way of you seeing truly what's been running the show. So my journey was incredible because it took me back through all of my generations and it showed me the dynamics that were happening in the relationships. And it was all about how the wounds were playing out in the relationship. So I could see my parents and their wounds and my grandparents and so on and so forth. So, and it also showed me in this journey, this is your purpose in life. You're here to help people understand this. You're working on your healing, and this was all meant to happen. And it even took me back to my marriage and what happened there. What was his wound and why that came up at that time, and as well as the engagement. What happened there? What was the wound? And it also showed me that I wasn't responsible for fixing any of these people, but that I
Mm,
had been trained to do that in childhood. I had been trained to pacify my mom or make her feel better because my dad was emotionally unavailable. So I became like, her counselor and her gift giver and confidant, everything that she was missing from my dad. But it was her unhealed wounds that created that dynamic with me, which was unfair to do to a child, you know?
I resonate with that so much. I was just reading your notes here again, that you sent through. That happens so much. And I think, I'm not sure which part it is now, but you said something to around the fact of we give and give so much, but where's our values and our value systems? And, we give not so much to want to be loved, but we feel like it's on us to do it. And um, it's really not our job. It's very unfair, isn't it? Put that on a
It
child.
is. But I think, for me, it was wanting to be chosen. And so you
Mm,
morph into what you need to be, whether it's the people pleaser, passive, or minimizing your own feelings, whatever it is, because you want to be chosen because you didn't feel as if you were chosen or that you were enough or your worthiness.
absolutely.
So you're seeking that
Yeah.
in a partner to do that for you when
Mm,
the work has to be done within.
mm. And we were just saying you lose so much of your own identity. You can do in it. Not everybody, of course, can't generalize, but in a marriage or a relationship. But for some of us that have gone into relationships with wounds from childhood, that we have not had our identity at all anyway before we go into a relationship that's not right with someone else that's got wounds themselves. I know for myself, I'm only finding my identity now through doing my work. And I had
Yes.
way too much responsibility and pacifying parents as well. So by the time it was time for me to get married, because I didn't want to miss out, everyone else was getting married around me. I went into a relationship that wasn't right, even though deep down I knew it wasn't right, with someone that had his own
Yeah.
wounds. Mm,
Yeah. And it's like we attach all these identities to ourselves. And I think in midlife is a time where when we start seeing those stripped away, whether it's by our own choice or force, it does create the question of like, who are we without all these labels and our
mm,
job and all of that? So and that was, I had never lived alone. This is the first year I've ever even lived alone because I got married very young. We were engaged. I was only 19 and then we had kids and everything. So um, all of a sudden I was like, who is Holly? And who's Holly without all the labels? And so it was scary, but it was fascinating to really find like at the soul, who am I?
yeah. And where are you? Do you think you are in your journey now, Holly? Like you're saying, you're living alone, and um, you've done, your courses and things like. Where would you say you're on your healing journey right now? You're happy.
Yeah,
And
I will say that this whole entire year has been extremely challenging because I felt everything. I felt everything of the past 20 or my whole life. I felt all the pain of that younger self. Like really where am I now is really healing the inner child, the inner children, because there's different stages where you felt wounds, whether it was a teenager or the younger self, like it's healing all of those parts of me and tending to them. I'm really focused on what does Holly need? What does young Holly need? What does teenage Holly need? And giving myself those things. So I'm in a very comfortable place being alone. However, I do know in my heart I would love to be in a relationship. I envision that for sure in the future. And there's no pressure to make it happen. I think, when it's time, it'll organically happen and it's going to feel different than in the past because I think I was always
mm,
seeking to be chosen as opposed to, oh, now I'm going to be choosing or magnetizing, So I feel like I'm just, I'm like really feeling how I feel in this new self or this uncovered self, I guess you could say. You're just back to who you were early
yeah,
on, your soul, you're like, uncovering the mass and everything. So it's really exciting place to be.
Yeah, it's exciting, liberating, scary, uncovering
Yes.
everything that's been covered up by so many masks for so long, right? And the
Yes. So
giver,
many protectors. Yep.
give in the hope that, I'll be accepted or chosen, as you were saying. So as we wrap up today, Holly, and I really want to touch on one more thing before we do wrap up. It's fascinating that I was looking at your website, Love Prescriptions. I just think that's amazing, amazing name. And, if people knew this going into dating, what we were just talking about today, how not easier, but it's a bit of a plethora of choices out there with dating, isn't it? And it's a bit of a minefield and scary as well. I know when I, had split from my husband and I went on a dating site, it's very different to old-fashioned dating or dating of the older days. What's one piece of advice you give to people out there who are dating at the moment, and what would be your prescription for them, so to speak?
There's so much frustration out there, right? And I think it's causing people to even put on more masks and to get into their defense mechanisms and protections and things like that. So I always tell my clients that use dating. And if you want to be on the apps, it can be frustrating, but use it to your advantage. Use it as almost like a playground to see what comes up for you during these experiences. Because if you're in a situation where you're wanting to be chosen as opposed to seeing that you're choosing somebody, that's a good indicator that you need to still work on some healing. What is it in you that still needs tending to? So use these experiences to highlight those things that you can come back to and work on self. And then, try to have fun, because when we create a scarcity mindset, there's nothing good out there, everybody's this, that, and the other, we will get that back. So the more we can live in the joy of it and try to find the fun in it, and maybe it's just like about going out and being feminine and practicing your flirting, or meeting somebody new, and it doesn't have to be the end result is they like me back. And if that's what your end result needs to be, again, we need to go back inside and see what's creating this for me.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And that is right. Maybe it's just about getting out and having some fun, getting out there amongst it, right?
Yeah.
As we say in Australia, get out there. Get out there. All right. Thank you so much, Holly, for being a guest.
Thank you.
I've learned so much. Thank you so much. So as we draw close to another episode of Midlife Unplugged, the fuck it years, we say thank you to Holly all the way from North Carolina. And I feel like we need to chat again, Holly. I'd like to unpack a bit more with you, if that's okay. Would you be open to coming back? Yes, I would love that. I really want to unpack a bit more of healing and the wounds and how we carry that into our relationships. So I'd really like to have you back on the show if you're open to that.
I would love it. Maybe I'll just come to Australia.
Yeah, maybe I'll come to North Carolina.
Okay. Sure.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. And see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
That's a wrap on this episode of Midlife Unplugged, the fuck it years. If today's conversation lit something up in you, hit subscribe, share it with your midlife crew, and keep the conversation going. I'm Lara Portelli. See you next week for another raw, real, and unapologetic chat.